Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Marina Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Tanya Cole-Lesnick. Tanya and I are going to be speaking on the topic, the power of group therapy in transformation. You know, this is what this show is all about, transforming your mind so you can transform your life. So today, we're going to be talking about group therapy because, as you will find in my conversation with Tanya, a lot of people kind of like fear that. So welcome, Tanya.
Thank you so much, Myrna. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yes, you're welcome. I'm happy to have this conversation too. You know, I learn right along with you guys every week, and I love it. This is like life school here. So I intend to learn about group therapy and why it's good for you today, just along with you. All right, so let me give you guys a short introduction to Tanya. Tanya Cole-Lesnick has been a psychotherapist, which is a licensed clinical social worker and coach since 1995. She received her master's degree in social work from New York University after group therapy changed her life. She has extensive experience in outpatient hospital mental health, private practice, and wellness. From those experiences over the years, she has identified her most important focus, helping people to live lives that light them up. She does this by helping clients to access and honor their truth, to change habits that do not serve them, and to heal faulty narratives so they are living in alignment inside and out. Her work revolves around intimate groups as she shares the inner worlds and being human together in a safe space is what she finds to be the most powerful way to transform our lives. So, like I said in the beginning, group therapy is, new for me and a new content for this show. So I want to start off by diving right into that. In your bio, Tanya, you said that group therapy changed your life. Can you share that experience with us? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started my career out as a graphic designer. And in those early days, I was very much longing for a long-term love relationship. And I was struggling to find a partner, and relationships were not lasting. And I didn't really understand what was in the way for me. And at the time, the idea of therapy, because this is more than 30 years ago, and even though this was in New York City, which is probably the most accepted area for therapy, or has been, before other areas, I still felt a lot of stigma. And I also was very dismissive of my issues and thinking, well, those aren't legitimate enough for me to explore therapy. And I kind of just dismissed it. But as time went on and my longing continued and the pattern wasn't changing, I decided I didn't really care if I was the right candidate or not. I wanted something to change. So at that time, I got a few names and I went to therapy with this wonderful woman named Bonnie. And right away, that experience was very healing. I felt like I could tell her what was going on. I did not feel judged by her. It felt emotionally safe to share my story. And so that part was great. But very early on, she suggested that I add group therapy. The thought of it was very terrifying because I was much more vulnerable with her than I really ever had been. Mm-hmm. So the idea of sharing some of that stuff with people who at that time were strangers to me scared me. But I was building some trust in Bonnie, and she thought it was going to be helpful. And I was sort of intrigued. So I said yes and started that process. And it was really a combination of the two, being in a group situation and then processing some of what came up for me separately with Bonnie, and then going back to the group, where I was able to grow in lots of ways. Number one, the reason why I thought maybe I wasn't able to have a long-term love relationship might have been because I wasn't lovable. That was what my own brain was explaining to me. Maybe I was unlovable. maybe that was what the problem was. So by going into this group situation, I was able to get to know people that I really admired and learn about their insecurities that were so similar to my insecurities. And then I was able to kind of peel away some of those messages that were just not true, and got more comfortable in my own skin and developed some confidence, became more embodied, because I think while I was trying to meet somebody, I kept curating the version of myself that I was going to show up as and trying to decide what somebody else was going to like, rather than showing up fully as myself, because that didn't feel so safe. And so all of that stuff happened. I did meet who became my husband pretty early on, and he and I just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. We've got two grown, amazing daughters. So that life that I longed for happened, and fairly quickly. But the part that I didn't anticipate was how much I was going to connect to myself, how meaningful that journey was going to be for me, and how much more satisfied with my life I became as I started to have a better relationship with myself. So that's when I decided to go back to school and become a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist and coach, and have been dedicating my life to helping other people have transformations of their own.
Wow. That is a very good story, and it's almost original, because you're right. I've not heard anybody go into therapy because they're looking for a life partner. It's usually going into therapy because of some kind of trauma, or addiction or something, whether it's group or not. So it's amazing that you did. So, which is what makes the spin on this conversation so unique. So I absolutely love that. And I have some circle backs on there. One is that what I know of group therapy is what I've seen in the movies. And the reason, they have the, when you go into addiction and you say, my name is Myrna and, I'm an addict or whatever. The reason that they do that there is because everybody there is an addict, and everybody there can identify, and you can share your space. And I think they do that for the same reason that you said. There's commonality. You feel that you're not alone. But what I don't understand, maybe we can unpack a little bit. So you felt that you weren't able to have a permanent relationship because you were unlovable. And when you went into therapy, you were able to realize that that message wasn't true. So if I'm going to, I'm thinking of me, I'm putting myself, if I think that I'm not lovable and I go into therapy and I see someone else that thinks that she's not lovable, how is that going to change me? How is that going to transform me? So.
Such a good question. Yeah. I mean, I think it's not one and done kind of situation. These relationships happen. This particular group was every week. So week to week, we might have different layers to very similar conversations. So it partly, I'm watching somebody else who is talking about feeling unlovable, and I can see how untrue it is. So it opens up a little bit of possibility in my own mind that that could be the case for me too. That if I can see how lovable she is and she can't see it for herself, maybe it's not that I'm unlovable. I'm struggling to see it for myself, which are very different things. So that was part of it. I think sharing more of my honest self with people and having people respond to that in such positive ways, I think helped me also see that my inner world wasn't so off-putting. I think I thought it was. And so I would take a little more risk as the relationships within the group of the participants would grow. Everybody would share a little bit more. And there was a very like in real time opening up that either happened or didn't. Some group sessions, we maybe stayed a little bit more on the surface. Other group sessions, maybe we went a little bit deeper, depending on sort of what got brought into the room and how we all responded to it. But the cumulative impact was really touching on these very deep places, and these deep places that was not typically happening in my life outside of group, or most of us, we don't typically go into such a deep place.
That's good. I like the answer to that question, because you're right. You know, the messages that we tell ourselves, it doesn't make any sense. For instance, you can be beautiful and you look in the mirror and you see that you're not, right? Or you can be attractive and thin, but you look into the mirror and you see that you're fat. So I like that, because when you're looking at yourself, you're this critical, this voice or whatever, but someone is talking and someone is saying, you know, I'm fat or I'm unlovable. And you're looking at this person and you're saying, oh my God, that is absolutely not true. So then you're right. The little voice, there's this little opening that will say, well, maybe it's not true for me either. But that's good. You know, I like that, because I can see how that happens. And you're right. Maybe the first time you get a little peak, you know, like a little crack, and then, you know, as you go through it, then the crack widens and widens and widens. So I love that. Second, circle back though. So you're saying very quickly you met your, and I mean, we're going off topic here, but there's so many women that are in that space that I need to touch on it, right? So when you, because I know we give an aura. I mean, I remember talking on the show about a friend of mine when I was growing up that, you know, she wasn't the most attractive woman or whatever. And I'm looking at her and don't think she's attractive. And she's looking at herself and thinks she's the bomb. And when she showed up and she brought that. And she, you know, she got relationships, because it's how you see yourself. So yeah, expand on that. Like when you started to see yourself as lovable, how did that affect, you know, how you showed up? And, you know, someone who is listening, can you share that tidbit with them?
Sure. Yeah. And I don't see this as off topic at all. I feel like it's all related. It's all sort of important nuances to start to touch on. I think for me, as I was talking about maybe being more vulnerable with people, sharing a little bit more of my truth with people, as I did that in the group, it felt safer for me to start doing some of that outside in the world. And so what I was finding is that I would take a little bit more risk with people, but the results were that they would feel more resonance with me. And so the connection would be quicker, the connection would be a little bit more solid with people in the world. I think too, what I was describing before about curating the version of myself that would show up, that's a very head-focused way to live, because you're thinking about everything. You're constantly weighing everything out. When I did that less, I was more in my body, and that can be felt. And I think there was just even physically a little bit more of a flow to me that people could feel as they were getting to know me, that was more there as I got more comfortable in my own skin, like I had sort of said, and I don't want to say it quickly again. But the other thing I want to say is that there was a very distinct change in how I thought of meeting somebody. When I was pre-therapy days, going out on a date, meeting somebody, I would always have the thought, ooh, I hope he's going to like me.
Yes.
When I went through this other experience with group therapy and starting to get to know myself on a deeper level, that thought changed to, I wonder if I'm going to like him.
Yes.
And also, I wonder if we're going to be a good fit.
Right.
And so just that
Mhm.
alone was
Yes.
huge, because it
Yes.
changed how I wasn't on the edge of my seat, holding my breath, hoping I did and said everything just right. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was very different.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I love the fact that I read a lot of books and there's like I mean synchronicity is just absolutely amazing. There is not one time I'm just reading something that I can bring in a conversation. Just this morning, I was reading Michelle Obama's book, The Light We Carry, and she was talking about a good friend of hers that was in her 30s, very successful woman. She wanted to be married. And she met someone online and she was going out with this guy for about a whole year and just wanted to be casual. She didn't want to bring any of her stuff to the relationship because she didn't want him to think that she was needy. So she went for a whole year with casual, don't know anything about him. He doesn't know anything about her. They never went deep. So that's exactly what you're talking about. So in that relationship, she would have gone and says, listen, I'm a successful woman. This is what I need. And she wouldn't think about how he receives it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
right.
So that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. You're going out and you know what? The crazy thing about it is that you will catch more flies or fish with that attitude than the other one because the opposite sex do not like that. You know what I mean? They much prefer a confident woman or whatever. Yes, bring who you are. And even if they don't like it, then you don't waste a whole year. And that was the point of Michelle Obama's to bring this into her book, is because of all the wasted time that her friend
Yeah,
did, even though she wanted to be married. And women in their 30s, they've got this biological clock going and all that. And she
yeah,
wasted time because she didn't want to show up as her authentic self. So
yeah, yeah.
awesome.
That resonates.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. So, all right. So I'm glad we dropped a little bit of nugget to you ladies that are listening. So, yeah, be true to yourself and let the chips fall where they may, that my grandma would say. All right. So let's get back to group therapy. Now, you wanted to talk about why you think people fear group therapy. And I think you probably kind of hit the nail on the head earlier that people don't like to tell how they're really feeling, even in group therapy, in a relationship. You know what I mean? They always want to
Mm-hmm.
mask or they want to put on something. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons. Maybe you have more. So, why do you think people fear group therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really are touching on the reason. I think it's the vulnerability piece, and I think it's what we are working on when we go into either a therapy or a group therapy situation. We want to improve some things that aren't going well for us. So to be honest about what's not going well for us, I think does feel very vulnerable. And there's real fear about how we're going to be received. And if people hear how badly we're struggling with something, maybe they'll agree with us. Like, oh, yeah, you are a lost cause, or whatever it is that we're telling ourselves. I think there really is that fear. Like, that was my fear, that somebody would say, oh, yeah, you are unlovable, actually. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Yeah, yeah. Agreeing with your diagnosis, right? Yes, right. Like if when you say, does these pants look fat on me or something? Is my butt big or something? You don't want anybody to agree. You're looking for a no.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now, in your experience, what helps clients move forward towards the changes they long for and what keeps them stuck? So we can just expand on what we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
You move forward with yours because you were able to be vulnerable and see commonality. But I guess some
Mm-hmm.
people stay stuck. So let's look at those.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when people can get curious about who they are on the inside, what's coming up, because I think so many of us can stay living in automatic pilot and continue on with the messaging that we grew up with, whatever it might be. So all kinds of messaging that people have. One that I struggled with for a long time was people pleasing, and this idea that if I wasn't accommodating, if I wasn't nice, if I didn't say yes to other people, I was going to be rejected, people were going to abandon me, and I wasn't going to be able to have the successful career that I longed for, all those things. And so to start seeing where that is separate from who you are, whatever the messaging is. Worth, people struggle a lot with feeling worthy, and sometimes they have their own ideas. Okay, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve whatever it might be that they're longing for, and some of those ideas. And so I think those are the kind of things, those limiting beliefs, and then the behaviors that get intertwined with those limiting beliefs. So whichever one it is, there's a behavior that goes with it. So if we go back to the people pleasing idea, then the behavior is the getting exhausted because I'm saying yes to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And the way transformation starts to happen is starting to recognize what we're each bringing into adulthood. What are the limiting beliefs that any of us have brought into adulthood? Not everybody engages in people-pleasing behavior, although it's a common one. But for some people, it could be like, I just need to excel at all times, and that's the only thing that's acceptable, and that's where they put all their energy, but they're sort of not allowing themselves to rest or have fun or do things that don't feel like they're productive enough. So for everybody, there's the combination of the limiting beliefs and the behaviors, getting curious about our own, and starting to realize that those limiting beliefs are not our truth, and starting to challenge some of those things and change behavior and not stay engaged in that automatic pilot stuff. So it's like I know I'm talking about a whole process here, but I think first off, getting curious and checking in and recognizing where you've got messaging that's not serving you, and then starting to make some changes, which can bring up a lot of emotions when we start to challenge some of this old beliefs that, we bought into because we grew up how we grew up.
Yeah. So let's say that someone is listening or watching right now, and because you're right, people pleasing is one of the big ones, and you might not even recognize it. And I talk about that topic a lot on the show, and when you were talking, or you were sharing your bio or your story, I picked up on that I didn't get a chance to circle back on it. But let's say someone is listening right now and they have identified that they're a people pleaser, that they want people to like them, right? What would you say? How do they go from being clear about it and maybe starting group therapy or regular therapy or something? What's the next step?
Yeah. So I think if somebody is identifying for them, and we're using of course, the example of people pleasing could be anything, but right now we're going to go with people pleasing. If somebody says, that's me, sure, getting into support, of course, I'm a big believer. I think that's always helpful, but it doesn't have to be the first step. I think starting to recognize the pain points can be really helpful. So it can be something like, when are you agreeing to things that you're dreading, that you don't want to be doing, that you notice like emotions coming up that are really negative connected to that? Are you getting depleted? Are you feeling resentful because you've said yes to things you don't want to be doing? And so resentment is often connected to times that we've said yes when we don't want to have said yes. So those are the times, those pain points, where I think it's really helpful to try and kind of walk it back. So if you think, I'm constantly depleted, and then you say, okay, what's that about? Why am I so depleted? When am I depleted? And it could be tracking it for a while. paying attention to your patterns for a while and then saying, oh, I noticed I get really depleted on the weekends because that's when I try to do things for everybody else because I'm trying to play catch up, for example. And so when somebody starts to get that next level of clarity, then it could be something like, all right, I am going to say no to the next thing that somebody asks me to do because I know it's not serving me to keep saying yes, right? Great idea. But that's when some of those emotions get really intense because then it gets scary. Then you're saying no. And this pattern got put in place because it helps keep you safe. And so in your mind, you're saying yes to these things because you think it's helping you stay loved. Now you're saying no, you're really worried somebody's going to abandon you. And to be honest, it could happen, right? It could happen. Somebody could say, well, forget it then. I don't want to
forget you. Yes, I understand.
But,
yep.
Yep. And I think you said it earlier, which I love, just this idea of like just looking at it regardless, like what is true regardless. So if you're saying no to something and somebody is deciding, well, then forget it, and your biggest fear came true, it's still important to take care of yourself anyway. Yes. And I'm also talking about that as a worst case scenario kind of thing. For the most part, people are going to understand or they're going to semi-understand. But taking care of ourselves, honoring ourselves is such an important practice for people to get into in order to live lives that light them up. For life satisfaction, I think we really need to honor ourselves. We got to know what that looks like. So it's a journey.
I agree. I love that. I love that because yes, not everybody that's listening is going to run off to get therapy. But what they've got to recognize is if, let's say, people pleasing usually shows up in close relationships. You know, if you got a people please at work, then hey, you know, I mean, I understand that a little bit. But normally, you know, you're people pleasing in your marriage, you're people pleasing with your friends, and you're right. You feel, you know, angry, or you're disgusted with yourself for doing it, but you do it because you're afraid that your friends will not want to be friends with you anymore, or your partner might, leave you or something like that. But really, isn't that what's best for you? Mm-hmm. I mean, it has no purpose. By having someone, even this relationship that Michelle Obama was talking about, this girl hang on to this thing, pleasing that guy, right, for a year, and then the relationship broke up. If she had gone on and does what she needed to do, she wouldn't have wasted a whole year. So do not people please because you're hoping to hold on to something that's not good for you. It's better Right. So I absolutely agree. Face your fear. You know what I mean? And
yeah. Yeah, and I think you're touching on too, like if somebody is going to leave the relationship because you've said no to something that to honor yourself, then they're not the people anyway for you to be putting your time and energy into. Right. And so, right. And some will be totally fine and some won't, but better just to live in a way that honors you.
Yes. I agree totally. You got to be strong, right? Those muscles.
Yeah, right. Which is a good point too. That was the other thing I was going to say is like this stuff does get easier. So as you start to strengthen those muscles and start to first get clear when you want to say no and then start honoring that, over time, it's going to be an easier thing for you to be able to do. So those muscles do get strengthened.
Yes, you build those muscles, right? Yes, you're awesome, right? Awesome. Okay. All right. Now, you also talk about living in alignment with your truth. Why is that? What do you mean by that? And why is that important?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about it first from what it looks like when you live out of alignment. And I'm going to go back to that story of me trying to curate the version of myself that I would show people. Part of what I was talking talking about is all that mental energy that went on while I was assessing everything that came out of my mouth, everything that came out of everybody else's mouth, so I could decide how I was going to respond to that. That required a lot of mental energy for me to do that work. And so when we're out of alignment, it is like that. It's the kind of thing where we're feeling a sense of dread, or we're feeling resentment, or we're maybe worried about what we did and said because we're worried about the consequences. And then all this energy goes into that. And I've actually been referring to it lately as this idea of energetic clutter, because I think that there's a lot we can spend our time and energy and our focus on that isn't helping us grow or feel the way we want to feel or tap into meaning in our lives. It just kind of keeps us running in place with all this energy kind of leaking out, but not going somewhere that we want to be going. So if we then look at what it means to live in alignment, when we're living in alignment, what we experience is kind of a sense of knowing that we're in the right place, that we're honoring ourselves. When we are identifying, for example, movement. I'll talk in my life, I've had a love-hate relationship with exercise, and I've had various forms of exercise that I've been into over the years. And one of the things that I brought back into my life is hiking, and I'm doing it through a hiking group because it just helps me connect to other people. I do it. It's got a lovely flow to it. I don't have that love-hate thing when I'm doing it this way because I enjoy it. I enjoy the connecting, and there's real flow to it. And so when we're in alignment, we can have more momentum because there's more flow. We're moving forward. There's more synergy. I think you touched on synergy earlier. And so our energy actually gets maximized when we're living in alignment, and we're not getting so stuck in our heads, weighing everything out, assessing things, ruminating about things. And I don't mean it's gone 100%. I mean, of course, we're human. Stuff is going to touch us that we want to explore, all of that. But when we start to develop a relationship with ourselves of knowing how to check in, how to make sure, does that feel in alignment, and make some decisions, yes and no, then as we move forward, there's a trust in ourselves that we're choosing well for ourselves, and then we can experience this sort of maximized energy. But I think so many of us live in these patterns that get so depleting that we don't even connect enough to our inner selves to know what's true for us. And so I think for many of us, the first job is to start recognizing what is cluttering up all that space for us so that we can get quiet and get a sense of, oh, what's my heart telling me here?
Right. I love that. And as you were talking, I recognize where the practice would come from with that. Because let's say that you go into a group therapy, you go into a group, right? And they're saying, okay, Tanya, do you have something to share? And you're sitting there and you're thinking of all the things that goes on in your mind, just like when you're on a date. Should I say this? If I say this, what do they think? What they're going to think about me, and all that. And then the day you decide to say, I'm just going to say it. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah.
So to me, that's probably where the practice is, right? And if someone is listening or watching don't have group therapy, they can just try it out with their friends, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Just I love that. Like, all right, I'm just going to say it because it does feel risky. But when we take a risk like that, and I find, I mean, of course, I'm in therapeutic environments all the time. So for me, it's not unusual to see it. But when I see groups, and I run little retreats as well, when I see people taking those kinds of emotional risks with each other, where they'll share something they feel maybe some shame about and feel uncomfortable to share it. When I see people do that, I'm always sort of celebrating them, because when the connections then that happen when people feel permission because somebody else is taking that chance, and they give
Yes.
themselves permission. Okay, if they can
Yes.
do that, then I can do it too. And it's safe to tell this person. I feel like this person at least gets it. And those relationships in the groups that get formed, there is that special kind of communication that happens from this inner place that's so beautiful to watch, because they really feel such, I mean, I'm in those situations as well, but when it's a group I'm running, for the participants feel so held by each other, because they really, it's just kind of the norm in those cultures, at least the ones that I create, for people to share that depth with each other and take those chances with each other.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I absolutely agree. You talk, because a lot of times when people are depressed, they don't want to talk. They don't want to talk to anybody. They hold it all in. And therapy is talking, which is why talk therapy has become so popular because you go to the therapist and you talk and she just listens. But that's part of the therapeutic thing, is that you're talking and you're sharing, and hopefully you're not being surface, you're going deeper and talking about those uncomfortable feelings. And yes, and in group therapy, what you're doing is seeing that there's other people that feel the same way, and then you don't feel so badly about yourself. And yeah, I'm thinking that that's actually powerful. It's absolutely powerful, because yeah, we didn't touch on how we got these messages, because I talk about that all the time. Almost every show we're talking about childhood trauma and how we get those messages. I deliberately didn't open that up because it happens almost every week on the show, but like you got the message somewhere that you're unlovable, right? And talking about it, and seeing someone say to you that has no reason to lie, right? That you are lovable, and that you are, what I mean? I'm pretty sure that helped you with your self-esteem and your self-worth and your value, right? So you want to talk about how we got those messages, right?
How I got the messages originally, or how I got from the group part, or both?
No, from you originally. Why did you believe that you're unlovable?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, and it's probably intertwined with the whole people pleasing stuff. I grew up with a mother who experienced a lot of anxiety, and that anxiety came out as anger and rage. And so what happened for me is that I learned how to not rock the boat. And so I wouldn't let my full self out. It didn't feel safe enough. And so that was part of what I grew up sort of learning how to do. And so I think in that, I just learned how to show parts of myself. And by showing parts of myself, I got the idea the full me is too much. The full me isn't lovable. And also maybe a workaholic father who, although he was very loving when he was around, was somewhat absent at times. So I think, and it's not that my parents were bad in any way. They were just human,
It's just the message that you got. And listen, it's the message that you got, right? So, and it doesn't always have to be, it doesn't always have to be the right message, but it's the message you picked up. So listen, I understand that totally. Obviously now, as a therapist, and also now that you've been in group, also now that you've done the work, you recognize it's probably a false message. That's not what they were saying at all.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And being able to see how it got developed, and also how entrenched it gets. This stuff gets so entrenched. We develop it, and then we go into adulthood. And even if we say, oh, intellectually, I understand it, I get it's not true, unless we really do some emotional work on that, there is a part of us that still believes some of those messages, even though intellectually we can sort of dissect it and see it as not being true. It still feels scary to challenge them.
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. Yes, the compound interest, the compound effect. You know,
Yeah.
your parents, you felt that you were unlovable because you had to hide part of yourself. Then you went into relationships you said that didn't last, and you wanted a permanent relationship, and you kept thinking that probably with every breakup that there's something wrong with me. It's a compound effect. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. I get it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, this is a perfect lead-in for what you do. Tell us about your work with groups and how you help your clients, and how listeners can connect with you and be a part of your work and your group and all these things.
Yeah. So I run it's a coaching group program called Activate, where people get a combination of group sessions with a few individual sessions so that people can focus on identifying what it is that they want to work on and bring that to group. And then sort of it's a 6-month commitment. And then sort of midway through, we assess what's shifting, where are they, and continuing to adjust goals along the way so people continue to clear whatever's in the way for them energetically and start to focus on building the lives that they really want to be living. So I do that group coaching program and do some small retreats as well, because all my work is virtual except for the retreats in person. And so that's just a more intensive weekend when people can really check in and do some of the work that we do in group, but a little bit more intensively. And so I have one coming in New York in October, so not, a number of months away. We just did one in April, which was amazing. And so anybody that's interested in working with me in any way, I offer a free discovery session that somebody can schedule themselves right on my website. And it's 20 minutes to chat about really group, individual, whatever they might be thinking. And I can help them know how I can help them in particular.
Awesome. What's your website?
So the easiest to remember one that I have, it brings you all to the same place, is clearenergeticclutter.com.
All right. So clear energetic
clutter.com.
Right.
Yeah, clearenergeticclutter.com.
All right. And what are your social media handles if anyone wants to follow you? Are you in social media, I should say?
Yes. So both TikTok and Instagram, I have the same handle, which is Tanya the Therapist. That's Tanya, the Therapist, all one word.
All right. So that's beautiful. All right. So I will link out to your website and link out to your Instagram handle. I'm not on TikTok, but any TikTokers that is listening, you know where to find Tanya on there. And I would link out to you. Yes, listen, your work sounds amazing. And it's always good when you give your own personal story as a foundation for what you do, because it was amazing foundation. You know, people think, like I said originally, that you need to have therapy if you have trauma, right? But no, you can just get therapy if something is not going the way you want it to go, right? Like you say, living, your best life, right? If you want to get married, if you want to have kids, if you want to, whatever it is that you want, get a better career, whatever it is that you want, you can go into group therapy, and even masterminds now, they do, it's probably the same thing, masterminds, group therapy, talk therapy, there's so many different ways to gain clarity and then start doing the work. Like you said, right? You start by talking to someone in the discovery sessions. That's clarity, right? You gain clarity. And yeah, you're right. A lot of times, because we run such automatic lives that we never sit back to say, I'm a people pleaser. I know that I don't like conflict. I know that I always back down from an argument. You know what I mean? Because I don't want, you get my point? All those different things.
Oh,
People know
yeah. It's
these
amazing,
things.
I think, when
Right.
people can start to identify that for themselves.
Yeah, well, that's the people pleasing. I know that, you know, someone in relationships that don't stand up, don't say what they want, this don't say what they mean because they don't want conflict. That's the most common one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody can identify with that, but they don't do the work to see why. You know, what are you afraid of, right? Why is it that you do that, right? And then you live unhappy because it doesn't make you happy. You live unhappy. So that's amazing. So Tanya, I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And any of you listening or watching know that I will have a transcript of my conversation with Tanya on the show page, which is blog.myhelps.us. If you're listening to this on the radio or, you know, on podcast, you can head over to the Transforming Mind YouTube channel and you will see the video if you prefer to watch instead of listen. And yeah, so definitely connect with her. I do believe that knowledge is power. If you want to experience Tanya's work firsthand, definitely you can you know, go to her retreats or, you know, connect with her on the web and join her program. Or, you know, I'm pretty sure she has some good nuggets on Instagram that you can, on TikTok, that you can also connect with her too. But, you know, definitely do something.
Oh, thank you, Myrna. I really love that.
Yeah, definitely do something. So that's amazing. All right, Tanya. So we're almost out of time. So any last words before we wrap up?
I think the thing that I often say at the very end is just to remind people, number one, to be kind to yourself. This is a tricky process, and I know that people have a tendency to get frustrated with themselves, especially if you start to recognize patterns you're not thrilled about that you want to change. It takes some time and energy to change some of these patterns. So to be kind to yourself and allow yourself some quiet and some space to get into the habit of connecting to yourself. Those are the two things that I hope people really hold on to in this process.
Yeah, well, that's good advice. You know, to know yourself is to grow yourself. So you got to know yourself, right?
Yeah, love that.
Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much. You know, I got an aha moment almost at my first question. Why was group therapy different from, you know, regular therapy? And you answered that right away. And that was my aha moment. And I get it. I understand it. So yes, so good conversation. Thank you, Tanya, for being on the show and for, you know, eliminating our awareness of group therapy. So thanks again.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for tuning in to the Transforming Mind to Transform Your Life radio podcast and television show. Thank you for being here. If you're listening to this on iTunes, would love for you to rate and review. If you're listening on YouTube, would love for you to subscribe. So until next time, namaste.